Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our second webinar looking at interesting and exciting topics in the environmental space. These lifestyle webinars are going to be happening every month. And today we're talking about a topic that a lot of South Africans actually don't engage with. And it's quite an interesting one for us, particularly at WWF. I'd like to welcome you all. And I want you to start by just closing your eyes and visualizing your cupboard. Your clothing cupboards. And how often have you stood in front of this cupboard, looked at the rows and racks of clothing that you have, and ended up saying, oh gosh, I have nothing to wear today. Do you really have nothing to wear? So today the topic is around sustainable fashion. And for you to ask yourself, first of all, why do you have racks and racks of clothing? And could it possibly be that we equate, buying to happiness? Often we refer to it as, oh, I'm feeling so down, I need some retail therapy. Is that the kind of happiness we're actually looking at? Often we buy more things that we don't need. Often we buy things we never wear. And sometimes more is not better. More is just more. I often, I listen to people and they relish in 2-for-1 bargains, Black Friday sale, end of summer sale, just in for summer sale, out for winter sales, until your cupboard is actually burgeoning and you're literally drowning in clothes and textiles. But have you actually asked yourself, what is the real cost of the clothing in my cupboard? What is the cost of my purchases? And here we're not referring to monetary costs. Here we're not referring to your pocket. We're actually referring to the planet. So today's panel, we're going to try and unpack, and excuse the pun there, unpack what the fuss is around fashion and why we want to move towards sustainable fashion. What is our relationship with fashion and clothing and buying? And how do we change it? What are the do's and don'ts? And actually, what is the impact? I have a power-packed panel today, and I'm really excited because these are 4 amazing women working in this space. I'm going to do a very quick introduction of them. So first we have Jackie May, who's the founder of Twig. Twig is a brand that's committed to creating content, events, and campaigns that promote sustainability, circularity, and ethical use. Jackie, if you can switch your camera on, that'll be great so we can see your beautiful face. Then we have Shamaira Moodley, who founded the amazing brand name, and Shamaira must admit, I really like this name, called Lani Rani. And Lani Rani is a brand that uses circular design principles, and it turns offcuts into amazing packagings, jewelry, homeware. And Rani's aim is something I think most of us in the environmental space want to move towards, and that's zero waste. Then all the way from Hong Kong, we have Hannah Lane joining us. Thank you, Hannah. Hannah's from Redress. Redress is an environmental charity with a mission to prevent and transform the textile industry, particularly around textile waste, and just reduce the impact that the textile industry and the fashion industry actually has on our environment. And finally, last but not least, we have our very own WWF Retail manager, Shaina Links. And Shaina comes to us back. We're very glad for that. And she's been in the retail and the innovative space around what you wear, with about 20 years of experience around product sourcing and e-commerce. And, especially for WWF, Shaina works extremely hard to try and find innovative ways to make responsible clothing choices when it comes to the pandas and the family and our broader panda family. So I wanted to start today's conversation actually unpacking the environmental footprint of what you are wearing and the clothing you purchase and what's in your cupboard. And I actually, to be honest, I've been reading and trying to figure this out. And I found a UNEP report called There's a Gap. And it's a report that was done with Ellen MacArthur. And in that report, it says it takes 3,781 liters of water to make a pair of jeans from the production of the cotton all the way to the delivery at the store. I then thought about it and I said, well, if I look in my cupboard, I have 7 pairs of cotton jeans, of which I only really wear, and really love 3. And I am being very honest here. So I took 3,781 and I times it by 7. And I ended up with 26,467 liters of water in my cupboard in the form of jeans. Then I said, all right, if I drink 1 liter of water a day, and that's me being super good, I have water for 72 years sitting in my cupboard. That kind of startled me considerably. And I actually went back to the Ellen MacArthur research to check if I'd made a mistake, because I thought, it can't be possible, man. Is my environmental impact just on my jeans that big? And then I started exploring more, and I looked at other reports, and I thought, wow, I need to speak to some experts in this field around what my footprint of what is on my body and in my cupboard around. And I'd really like to unpack more around this environmental footprint, Jackie, and I'd really like to start with you. And just, thinking about what are the real impacts of this industry when it comes to our planet, most importantly. Do we consider the carbon footprint of our fashion? Is it actually something we calculate? Is it something we talk about in South Africa? Is it a hidden secret? What exactly are the environmental costs of our fashion industry?
Good question. If you look at it locally, I would say because of the total destruction of the textile industry due to imports, that we probably reduced our environmental impact in South Africa, the fashion impact. But I mean, that is no reason for us to neglect what the current manufacturers, what they are doing to the environment. And I mean, it's all the same issues that are happening globally. And I think, for instance, if we look at which are water, pollution, the chemicals used in dyeing, there was a recent report actually in Lesotho where researchers found a blue river. So, it might not be happening in South Africa, but it's happening very close to our borders. All kinds of the energy use, we have dirty energy in South Africa. So that would be something to look at. In terms of what each of our manufacturers are doing and how they're addressing it, very interesting question, because there's very little understanding and very little transparency. We can see in internationally there's a lot of emphasis on transparency so that we can be watchdogs. But in South Africa, we're still finding it. I don't know how you at WWF are finding this in your work, but we're still finding a lot of opaqueness. And it's about retail competition amongst each other, retailers competition with each other. They don't want to release what they're doing, but there are signs of really good news. TFG, which is one of our biggest and most aggressively growing retailers, is taking it very seriously. They're putting the environment into their decision making as a stakeholder, and they're taking care of the waste, but at the same time, I mean, and also there's a big emphasis on job creation, which is again something we have to address in South Africa. But I mean, my concern is that this is not being done with the environment enough. For instance, as they try to meet their targets to increase local production, which is thanks, Shahina, which is a big drive by government. They want to increase local procurement increase it to 60%, and some retailers are still only producing locally of 20%. So there's a lot of growth that's going to happen. Is that growth going to happen according to the criteria that we are interested in for the environment? And I don't know what the answer to that is, to be honest, because I don't know. I know everybody's interested in it, but the drive is to make money and create jobs.
Absolutely. So at what cost is that growth going to come at? That's a fantastic point to bring you in, Hannah, because you're already working in a very well-established textiles economy. And Redress is looking at these environmental impacts very seriously. And to kind of get us talking about it, I read this and please shed some light on it in this Ellen MacArthur Foundation report, where it said that this industry accounts for 10% of our global emissions, which is more than both the aviation and the shipping industries combined. That is frightening when we think about the impacts of climate.
It is, but if you think about the amount of people who are flying around the world in terms of percentage of the world, it's very small compared to the global population. And I think one of the things that a lot of people think when all these statistics are throwing around is, oh, fashion, I'm not really engaged in fashion. But when we talk about fashion, of course, it's clothing, and every single person on the planet, well, nearly, engages in wearing clothing, right? So I think one of the biggest barriers that we come across is kind of crossing into that this is not my responsibility, or it doesn't affect me because I'm not a fashionista, or I'm not out there like consuming like some people are. But essentially, like everybody needs to wear clothes, right? But the fact is that over 100 billion new garments are made every single year, and there are not that many people needing new garments, right? There's enough. So I think from a consumer perspective, I think that often the statistics are quite overwhelming, because even you mentioned there the sort of water statistics around jeans. Like, obviously the water used to make those jeans doesn't disappear off of the earth, right? All water continues circulation. It's the processing. It's often that where jeans are made are already strained in terms of getting clean drinking water to their populations. And Jackie just mentioned the river in Lesotho there. There's a lot of problems with that in Asia, where a lot of the manufacturing happens. So I think the overwhelming part is something that causes a barrier for a lot of people, and at Redress we're trying to sort of break down those barriers and to create really interesting easy ways to kind of engage with more sustainable fashion without sort of overwhelming people with the guilt part of fashion. So yeah, I guess that's where we come from. I'm not sure if that answers your question. I've gone off on a tangent.
Absolutely. No, you're spot on. And that's exactly how I felt reading these reports. I felt extremely overwhelmed, and it, as a person who works in the behavior area for WWF, feelings of overwhelmed, guilt, and fear get me to do nothing because I feel the problem is bigger than me actually doing something. And I think, we need to start doing something, no matter how small it is. And Shamaira, I'd like to come to you, because you work in an area where there's actually a hidden waste that a lot of us don't see, and that's offcuts in manufacturing and clothing manufacturing and in fabric stores. Because I don't go into a factory to see where my clothes are made. I go into a store, but there is, I remember just once I was walking in Woodstock, which is a popular place where there used to be, and Jackie will know, lots of stores. And there was the tar was kind of glittering, and I couldn't understand why it was glittering. And it was sequins that a store had obviously used, and they just hosed it straight into the drain. And the tar was glittering with all of this wasted sequins. Now, sequins is plastic, and that's going into an environment that I really love, which is the ocean. So, talk to us a little about this hidden waste of offcuts.
Right. So, when I think about fashion, I think about food, because I feel like, every day we make the same choices. There's food and then there's fashion. Both things are necessity. Unless you're at home, of course, you don't have to wear clothes. But it's a daily activity. So, a lot of my impact about designer comes from being actual consumer. And the backtrack, but when I used to live in Europe, right, any food package you'd buy would be clearly labeled, right? So it was like a robot system, red, green, orange kind of thing, simply to give you cues about the nutritional values of food. But when we look at clothing, we just look at the price tag. You look at the aesthetic value, and then you look at the cost. Price tag, if it's rare, that's probably even better. There is no way, or at least there's no legislation or labeling that gives you, as a consumer, some kind of conscious pushing you forward to make those decisions because of the labeling being wrong. And at most, I might go and look at what is the fabric that this is made from, and that was it. I'd understand the fabric, I'd understand the cost, but I didn't know the environmental impact until I'm actually an accountant. Fashion has found me, and somehow I keep trying to run away, but I'm still here. And as a designer, for the last week, I've just finished a collection, and I spent a week in Durban in a CMT, which I never had the insights. I work like very hands-on in my little studio at home, using offcuts and scraps that I collect from factories in Woodstock. So they do t-shirts, and then like the side seams and a little bit of the neck collars are all left over. I collect those, and then I weave them into skirts and earrings and other things. But this had given me like a kind of scalable view of how much of waste there actually is. The challenge: go into this factory and use what they have. So for me, I loved that because I'm used to being resourceful, because all I ever work with is either offcuts or vintage fabric, which has been donated to me, and then dead stock, which is kind of the end of roll stuff when other designers kind of finish off, and then these go into stores, and then you can buy them at a very low price. It kind of just avoids them ending up in a landfill. So that's how business runs at the moment. I only use, so no virgin fabric is used, whether it's sustainable or not. I only use offcuts. So trying to marriage the use of the offcuts, and then I started looking at zero waste design, where actually I build the design into my patterns where there's minimal amount of waste.
Yeah.
Do, and it was very difficult to do in a factory environment where they're used to working at scale and at speed. So I did experience those challenges. And then the other thing I have implemented, I'm excited to show you my collection, is where I've decided to do multifunctional clothing. So every single piece, you have many options in terms of how you want to wear it.
Yeah.
So every, first of all, wear the dress as a coat. You can, you know, like you get the cargo pants. I'm very proud of this one because I killed the factory workers trying to design this cargo pants. Shorts. So I have a coat that's a dress, and then it's detachable. So you get a top and you get a skirt, and you get to customize it. So these were the little things trying to put in to say, yes, maybe now you can buy less because you can wear it different ways and you can wear it more often, and it will potentially last you longer. As well as then all my applique, all the decorative work on the garments, all use some scrap. So I think it just comes from a place as being resourceful as a designer in many, many different ways. That's how it's working for me so far.
Absolutely. And you're spot on. We have to be creative. We have to be resourceful, and we have to close the loop on the clothing supply chain, you know. And you know, Jackie, I'd like to come back to you. And very often I hear this from friends that say, well, you know, if cotton is such a thirsty plant, maybe I should just buy clothes that's polyester, you know, or recycled polyester. Is that an option? Is it a long-term option? You know, I know that polyester has issues around microfibers. I know that polyester is plastic. So there's severe issues because plastic comes from crude oil. You know, so, and then other, you know, people talk about, well, let's use hemp. Let's, you know, are these viable options when we look at this industry, or is it a complete systems overhaul and to reinvent or you know, I hate to use the word address, but readdress this actual industry in its entirety?
How much time do you have, Pabs?
Oh.
Sure. It's so interesting. It's such an it's become such an emotive issue. The fibers. I'd love to pick your brain about this too, Hannah, because you know, I personally, from a personal perspective, I feel quite strongly about polyester, and that's purely because it's driving the oil industry. And I think, you know, the oil industry needs to be curtailed as quickly as possible. And also polyester has allowed for the runaway fast industry to grow to an extent that it has. But we also have to really be realistic about what polyester does and what synthetics do in terms of fashion and athleisure wear and things that have become quite important in our lives at the moment. And we also have to be very, very sensitive to price sensitive consumers and people who really need affordable clothing. So it's not always, you know, it's a luxury in some ways for me to be having a conversation about my personal views on sustainable fibers. But in this, so if I come back to South Africa, I'm actually going to, I've registered to do an MPhil in organic cotton growing in South Africa because I want to understand more about why there's a resistance to it in South Africa. And I mean, I have my personal opinion, but it's not based on any research or fact, so I won't repeat them here. But I think it's a really interesting space. And I think hemp in South Africa we've got a new master plan, which is a government plan to try and investigate and grow and understand hemp in South Africa, obviously from a medicinal viewpoint, but also in terms of building and textiles. So I think that's really exciting. I think that we haven't tapped into the organic cotton space enough yet. And in terms of polyester, I've told you my opinion about that. And then we do have an incredibly successful recycler of bottles into polyester, and that is the more debatable part that I find interesting. Is like, should we be converting bottles into polyester fiber or into polyester, and can it be recycled, and should we be encouraging more virgin plastic going into the system because we can get rid of it and turn it into fibers? And then how do we reduce the microfibers? So I think, there are no clear-cut answers to this. And also, we haven't explored in South Africa we don't fully understand, and we haven't fully developed the textile recycling industry. We have an incredibly amazing textile waste recycling system, but most of it gets downcycled. We're not doing much fiber to fiber. But we actually have capacity to recycle all the textile waste that you're talking about, Shamara. So there are these two big companies that can take it all, and they can shred it, and they even export the shodding, I think it's called, to other countries to use for whatever it is, insulation and dog blankets and those things. But we don't have much fiber to fiber. In fact, we have no fiber to fiber. So when we talk about recycled polyester, can that be recycled into what? So the question, there are many more questions than answers to that question, perhaps. And I am exploring it. I'm actually putting together a report on it, which we, at the moment, it's very interesting. We've done research. We've done some data capturing in terms of what the retailers are selling. And then we are now, next week, we are going to do a practical collection of dumps and understanding what it is that what's landing up in dumps. And then we are talking to industry to find out what the capacity is and what actually is available in terms of recycling. Because I think once we understand what happens to textile waste, we have a better idea of what we should be promoting in terms of sustainable fibers.
Yeah, that's really important work, Jackie. And you're right, we do have more questions than answers in South Africa compared to other countries like the UK and the US that have been investing quite a bit of time and energy and effort into understanding this industry and understanding what to do with the waste from this industry. And then, Shaina, I'd like to come to you around recycled polyester. And I'd like to tie that very closely with a job that you have, which is very difficult. And that is to find the right purchases for a store like WWF shop, because there's a lot of greenwashing out there, and I see it myself as a shopper. And just, talk to us about like some of the challenges that you face to understand better that if you put an item for an organization like WWF, that we have confidence in that item that's in our store.
So just to continue with the recycled polyester. So a couple of years ago, we did go down the route of getting one of a large retailer, Cape Union Mart, with the K-Way range, to produce a recycled polyester item, because we do want retailers, instead of using virgin polyester, is to rather use, if you are going to use polyester, let's use recycled. That's not the solution. I mean, it's ideally not what we want, but instead of creating brand new polyester into the environment, let's see what we can reuse. So we did the trial with Cape Union Mart. It went well. It sold really well in stores. I know that they are now expanding their range beyond one item. It launched with us, it was one item. And I think they're now expanding to 4 items or a larger range in stores. So we basically push them to move towards recycled as opposed to virgin. But for me personally, when it comes to shop, I'm moving away from recycled clothing, because it's something we throw in the wash, those microfibers get into the water, and I'm moving away from that completely. If I do use recycled polyester, it's really items that doesn't require going through a wash cycle. So whether it's a bag or maybe a repurposed coffee cup or whatever the item may be, I try to not let it be something that needs to go in the wash, because we don't want to contribute to that microfiber problem. And WWF itself has such a incredibly long sustainable criteria document that I send to all new suppliers, and they've got to make sure that they tick all those boxes. I cannot just bring any supplier on board. I also do site visits to actually see what the working conditions are. So we're very conscious of who we partner with and what items we actually bring into the store.
Fantastic. Thank you, Shayna. That's great to hear. Obviously, as a fellow panda, I have confidence in what I'm purchasing. We've spoken a lot about fast fashion, and we've spoken about the environmental issues, but I wanted to come to you, Hannah, and this might be a tough question. I know I've thrown a tough one at Jackie, but when we consider the fact that this industry actually is worth, what, 2.4 billion US dollars, it directly employs around 75 million people across our globe. How do we balance that against, what is essentially people who need jobs, who need food? It's a livelihoods issue, especially in South Africa where it's collapsed, where we're trying to grow it. How do we balance that without making it an enemy of the environment?
Well, I actually don't think that's a particularly hard question, because it's really just about evolution. And I guess the ability to adapt or die. I use this one because I'm often looking at if you look at the music industry and the huge shift that's gone from cassette tapes to CDs to digital music and the streaming sites and things like that, like the ones who have seen what's coming and adapted to that are the ones who are doing really well. The others are dead now.
Yeah.
And I think, Jackie mentioned earlier about the sort of the sort of employment of people and how valuable that is. But from my point of view, we're seeing so much exciting innovation around new types of fibers, for example, natural alternatives to leather, not polyester leathers, but really exciting kind of non-environmental damaging leathers. We are seeing enormous progress in fiber recycling. So one of the issues that we have had in a long time, and why plastic bottles are often used in recycled polyester, is the fact that when you mix fibers in a garment, if you have a stretch pair of pants, you've got lycra in there, you've got polyester, sometimes you've got a bit of cotton. And there hasn't, until recent years, been the chemical recycling process that can pull those fibers out for recycling. So as was being said just now, you end up downcycling. It goes into other products that it's not ideal, because you want all of those raw materials that go into garments to be kept at their top quality throughout their life. And what's happening at the moment is they get used once and then downcycled, and it ends up in landfill, right? That's the end goal when you're downcycling. So for me, I think the amount of exciting stuff happening in fiber recycling means that there are going to be millions of jobs if the technology gets rolled out across the world. And who knows, in as little as 5-10 years, the whole fashion industry could look different, because it's not about farms and textile mills, and it'll be about bringing that raw material back into use in different ways. So I think that there's a huge amount of really exciting. It's just the scalability and those brands or governments or organizations that are committed to kind of pushing this stuff forward quicker. Because that question that was asked earlier, like, what fiber should I buy? Like, I hate that question, because you can't say everybody buy natural, because there's not enough land to grow natural in the world. If we keep doing that 100 billion new garments a year, like, we won't have enough room for food, let alone the consumption rate. So, I mean, I know we're going to be talking about looking at, you mentioned at the beginning, our own consumption, but I think part of the problem is our relationship with fashion, our relationship with clothes. And, it's not necessarily, I need to look at all these labels and start really looking at every single brand in detail. Who do I buy from? It's more just, how do I have the relationship with my wardrobe? What do I own? And things start moving in the right direction if you start doing that.
Fantastic. And thank you for that, Hannah, because you're kind of leading us the last couple of minutes towards that particular area of discussion. And it's around, what is your relationship with what you wear? And the fact that we don't value what we wear anymore. I would just trying to prepare for this webinar, I did a cupboard audit, a wardrobe audit, and I was horrified by what is in my cupboard, what it's made of, and then kind of, going through it. But I had to take a step back and actually say, okay, besides being overwhelmed, what are the solutions? What can I do? And the first thing I did was I did this as, you're a behavior person and you don't know what to do. Change your behavior. Change your relationship with your clothing. Come on, this is not so difficult. And that's some of the solutions I kind of like to explore, and I'll start with you, Shumaira. Like, you talking about, using the offcuts. But I think for me, what I'd like to, kind of explore with you is fall in love with your own style, your own sense of fashion.
So for me, really, the truth is when I became a mom, right, my view on fashion and consumption changed radically. So, kids grow out of things super quickly. So for me, but then I'm also very sentimental. So I'm like, oh, that's the first one the baby wore. When, so that's the other thing I'm trying to say here is the way men buy and the way females buy, completely different. Things are wired, all know that. But like when a woman, it's like, I see like an adventure for us. We go out looking for treasure. It's a journey, it's an experience, and bored at the end. And they go on a mission. They're like, okay, I need a pair of pants. It needs to be this color. And that's kind of where it ends. I don't know if it's a study. There must be a study like done, like how much clothing a man owns and buys over his lifespan versus a female. I'd really like to understand that. Bringing it back to this relationship, and I was trying to figure out how do I kind of assess my own relationship. So I asked myself, when do I do these kind of things? When do I buy things? So, is it when I'm going through some emotional state, when it's PMS? Is it then when I have this urge to reward myself with something physical? And then I want to know, do I like look online, or do I want to go into a store and like feel and touch and try on things? And then why am I doing it? I think of my grandmother. She has this habit, like she formed like an obsession with, say, Persian rugs, and then she'll spend like a few months collecting these things, like how a person would collect stamps for some reason. So obviously it's something at play. And then, so the who, what, when, and why am I buying it? So why am I do I need it, or am I being greedy? And so I keep having to ask myself these questions. When I started my fashion blog 2 years ago, again, because I was a mom and on extended maternity leave, the financial implications were there. So I decided to take a fashion diet, and I said to myself, I will not spend any money on clothing. That's it. I won't spend anything, and I will prove that you can still have, you can write on fashion, be a fashion, and spend nothing. So that's where my whole process of coming into fashion started, when I made this promise to myself and I stuck with it. And here I am today now, using these offcuts and using this waste. But yeah, so each of us have a different relationship, and we have to continuously ask ourselves, why are we doing these things? So yeah, that's just my take on us.
Thank you, Shumaira. And then, if I can, we're running through time like you have no idea. And Jackie's right. We should have had this as a conference as opposed to a webinar. But I'm going to ask, Jackie, Hannah, and Shahina, if you can give me your 3 kind of best ways of, how do we start addressing this issue as my individual actions, as Hannah, you obviously with Redress, you have some really wonderful insights in what's happening in the international market. And South Africa is not yet there. The understanding around buying secondhand clothing, renting clothing, we're not yet there, but we're getting there. And just 3 like big ideas that you think, this is going to save us. This is going to get us on the right footing when it comes to individual actions and behaviors around what the fashion industry is doing to our planet. Jackie?
I think that we got to be, the first thing is we can't be too hard on ourselves. It's such a complicated issue. I think Hannah also said, in terms of what we expect from industry, what we expect from retailers, what are we expecting from government? It's a collaborative effort, and we're all learning as we go. And as I said earlier, talking about sustainable fibers, there's just so many things to consider, and it's exciting. I mean, there's so many great things to do. So that's the one, is not be hard on ourselves. I think we have to look very carefully at And I mean, you said in terms of, you know, we also have to be our own self, you understand your style, but also it's about confidence. You know, we constantly being, it's like the beauty industry, we've been constantly told we need to buy this, we need to buy that, and you'll feel better and you'll have more confidence and you'll be more beautiful, you'll be a better mom, all this stuff. That's something that I think is so deep and it's so difficult to change, but it really is a fundamental issue about what's driving our consumption behaviors. And I think we just need to be sensitive to how we're being influenced and what that means about our confidence. Anyway, that's, yeah. And then the third thing is you know, your wardrobe is a minefield. Enjoy it. It's your route. There's so much to do with what you've got, and there's so much you can alter. In my because I run a regular swap shop, I mean, I've kind of minimized mine down, but I still, as Shamaya said, I've got so many things I can't get rid of. I've got my grandmother's bell bottoms that she wore to the Beatles concert in Liverpool one year. I mean, I'm going to have those forever.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jackie. You know, spot on. Hannah?
Okay, so my first one would be do that wardrobe review, get everything out and really look at it. So this stat that when we wrote our book, Dress with Sense, just a little plug here, Dress with Sense if you want to get into it. We were looking at behaviors and we found that 40% of purchases actually were found to be impulse buys. And the other big stat that we found was that 20% of people's wardrobe is generally what they wear most of the time. So when you do that wardrobe review, it's really looking at like, what is what you wear, right, like most of the time, and why, and then what is all the rest, like, and that leads a little bit into my second point, which is like, if you want to make a couple of changes, the first one is occasional stuff. So I'm talking about if you've got a wedding, if you've got a party, if it's Halloween or Christmas, like stuff that really, if you think about it, you're probably only going to wear 1 or 2 times. Like start there. Maybe you can try secondhand. For me, the exciting thing about secondhand, I hate going into shops and going through the one size only racks and finding something for my size. Like I've got a strange body shape. I never find stuff. But what is really exciting is luxury, because before secondhand, I couldn't afford luxury, right? So it was my first sort of step into that world of beautifully well-made clothes for a price point that I could afford, or rental where you know, again, you give it back at the end, so it's a bit cheaper. So I think if people are nervous about secondhand, that's really also a nice way to sort of get into it, because you get these beautiful things for really no money, depending on the platforms that are available to you, obviously. And then my third point would be, if you don't have to change your behavior, if shopping with your friends is something amazing that you like doing, it's really just about tweaking and being conscious. So like maybe you can, if you buy secondhand and you let your clothes back into that secondhand market, you can buy as much as you like. Those clothes already exist. Don't feel bad in yourself for your thrill that you get through shopping. You can still have that. There's so many beautiful things on the secondhand market. So don't beat, I mean, it's back to what Jackie said, but don't beat yourself up about loving fashion. Like there are many ways to consume fashion without having to buy something new. I think that's 3.
Fantastic. Yeah, and you're right, you know, resell, rebuy, share. You know, it's in South Africa we have a term called Ubuntu, where we share. Share your clothes, you know.
Particularly for weddings, right? Like I've borrowed so many garments from friends, you know, your friendship groups hopefully are separate, though they don't see the same thing at the wedding, if that's a problem for you. It's not for me. I wear the same thing all the time. But you know.
Absolutely. Thanks, Hannah. Shahina.
From my side, I would say number 1, I think the stigma of hand-me-downs, I don't think it needs to be such a big stigma. I have a 4-year-old niece and a 2-year-old nephew. And about 3 years ago, I bought a sassy t-shirt that I sourced for WWF. And she wore it, you know, until she grew out of it. And yesterday, he refused to wear the shirt that we put him in. And he wanted something different. And he loves anything to do with the ocean. And I pulled out this orange t-shirt with a little fish on, and he loved it. And the thing is, because I source such good quality, that garment that I paid, I don't know, maybe like 150 Rand for 3 years ago, it's still around and it's still being used. So he can still wear it. I think we just need to, if we look after the things that we do own and buy the best quality you can afford, because everyone can afford different things, but it shouldn't be, oh, you know, it's a hand-me-down, I'm poor. It's not always to do with being poor. It's just look after the item, cherish the items, and pass it on to the next loved one. So that's my first point. The second one is fixing things. We've got a sewing kit passed down from my grandmother. We still own it. And every time a button comes off or the thread is coming loose, we just pull out that needle box and we just fix the thing. I feel like a lot of people, someone told me, oh, this was a guy though, the thread was coming out of his t-shirt and he said when that happens, he just throws the t-shirt away. I'm like, no, why fix it?
Yeah, exactly.
No. And then thirdly, this is something that I'm trying to do. I'm trying to move towards a capsule wardrobe where I only own a few items, the highest quality that I can afford. And I think we like to feel good in our clothing, but I think we need to care less about, oh my God, I've worn this outfit 3 times. So many people have seen me in it. It doesn't matter. As long as you like the item, you can wear it over and over, it doesn't matter. So I'm trying to own less, but what I do own, I am absolutely in love with it so that I always get joy out of wearing that item whenever I wear it.
Yeah, fantastic. Shumaira, I'm going to ask you for one comment and then I'm going to have to close because we're now 15 minutes over time. And I think our audience is being amazing because nobody's dropped off the call just yet.
So my thing is that, you know, dressing doesn't have to be just dressing. Don't take yourself too seriously. Have fun. Find yourself a sustainable fashion guru and follow them and like learn their tricks of the trade. And all things are possible. I started a little brand by taking my old stuff and upcycling them. Learn a craft, learn how to mend. It's incredibly therapeutic. So yeah, that's what I think.
Fantastic. So it is very clear. The message is resounding. You know, it's not so secret. Look after, buy quality, wear longer, or, you know, take care of it, share, you know, donate, buy secondhand. I know in South Africa, there's lots of stigmas attached to it, aspirational stigma, social stigma. We need to move beyond that because while we might have, as Hannah said, billions of garments, we only have one planet. And that's something we have to keep in the back of our mind. So thank you, ladies. This has been a phenomenal webinar. I have learned so much. I would actually, you know, I'm going to suggest to the team that we actually do a follow-up because this is such an interesting topic. And I made so much notes and we haven't even touched on half of them. So we need to start maybe focusing, you know, on specific things. And my closing would be something that I read recently. It said, the most sustainable item is the one you didn't buy. So on that note, thank you. Have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you to our audience for staying the whole extra 15 minutes. And thank you, Jackie, Hannah, and Shumaira and Sheena. You guys are phenomenal women of power, and we're going to change the world, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.